Today my guest is Hadi Hariri. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thanks.
Thanks for being on my show.
Thank you.
Where are you from?
Where am I from? Originally I was born in Iran.
Yeah.
Yeah, I left there when I was 3, moved to Cambridge, UK, and now I live in Spain. So
you're an international, and we're in the
where do I hail from?
Ohio.
Now
Right
I'm
now.
Ohio. But where am I from? I consider myself Spanish these days. So.
We were talked earlier today on CouchDB.
Yeah.
What is CouchDB?
CouchDB is a document database.
What is a document database?
Okay, if we look at how we've persisted information so far, the vast majority of times we've always not thought about what database we're going to use or what model. We've always thought, the biggest decision has been, are we going to use Oracle or SQL Server or MySQL? We've never thought about, are we going to use a relational database or something else other than a relational database?
Yeah, most of the databases I've used are relational.
Always relational, right? And yet put that into comparison with the thousands or hundreds of languages that we've been using to develop software. We're constantly innovating in languages, but when it comes with persistence, we've always been focused on, let's just use a relational database.
Okay.
Right? Many years ago there was attempts to do something different, because relational, it's great because it's efficient, it's been around for so long, it's the best way to store data.
Best is a relative term.
Yeah, relative term. There was attempts to do alternative ways, right? Store data as objects, etc. But it wasn't giving the good performance. It wasn't giving the requirements that businesses needed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've progressed so much, and memory has become cheaper, hard disks have become cheaper, they've become bigger, etc. So we've constantly been stuck in this persistence model of using relational. And document database is basically what it is just thinking about storage in a different way. To put you an example, let's take an invoice, right? Every time I say to you, let's store an invoice, immediately, like this, in your head, it's master with the header, detail with the lines.
Right, because I'm a developer and a database guy.
I'm a relational database developer, right? I am as well, right? In a document, you actually store the invoice as is.
Okay.
So it's physically like taking a document represents a model, an object, a real-life document that the business works with. Mm-hmm. So in our case, an invoice, you would store the invoice with the header and the details all in one record, so to speak.
Okay.
Okay, so imagine if we're talking about, the blob fields in normal SQL Server, imagine that you would store an ID, which is the invoice ID, and then the whole entire invoice would be stored as a blob. Okay. In the blob field. Right?
Okay, and that's the document database.
That's kind of like a
document
document
invoice,
database.
the document, and storing that
it,
is the single unit of work.
Yeah, so when you talk about a customer record, you would take the entire record and store it as a document. When you talk about an order, it would be the entire order stored as a document. Okay. It's about getting rid of the mismatch that exists between the real life objects or documents that we work with and that of relational databases. Okay. Which was partially solved kind of with ORMs, right? The whole existence of ORMs was to try to remove this impedance mismatch.
Try to map that.
Yeah, map that to another. So here it's saying, you know what? Let's get rid of the requirement of breaking these up into tables and columns, and therefore we don't need an ORM anymore. We just store things as is. Now, with the improvements in languages, with processors, with CPUs, with memory drives, hard disks, that's becoming possible because it's actually saying we can get the performance that we need, the reliability that we need without having to resort to this kind of relational model. Okay. So that's where document databases kind of lie.
Okay. And CouchDB is a document database.
CouchDB is a document database. It was initially written in C++, and then they ported it over to Erlang, which is very good for concurrent programming. Okay. The guy, Damien Katz, that wrote this actually used to work for IBM in Lotus Notes. Okay. So a lot of people that work with Lotus Notes see a resemblance between Lotus Notes and CouchDB.
Sure, they have these. They call them they call them databases.
Yeah.
And people would run their business off of that. For this application, just create another database, another notes database.
Yep. Yeah.
So it looks a lot like that, huh? Every row is just an object.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now are people using it now? Is this, are my .NET applications just connecting to it?
So the reason that I got attracted, because this will fill in why I answer your question. The reason that I got attracted to document databases was because I was suffering with the mappings and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reason I got attracted to CouchDB was its simplicity to work with. It's based on HTTP, right? So it's like a web server. You just make requests to it, and one of those requests is, you know how when you want to get a document, you just do a get and the ID of the document. When you want to save a document, you just do a post or a put, right? So the actual interface to CouchDB is just HTTP. It's based on, you know, the RESTful interfaces,
Okay.
representative state transfer. It uses a RESTful API.
So if I want to write to or read from a CouchDB, I'm always calling a URL?
Exactly. And you can do that via a browser, you can do it via a web request client, you can do it via a library that's specifically written to interact with CouchDB. But the core CouchDB access is HTTP.
Okay.
And there's different wrappers around that based on your needs or preferences, so to speak.
Okay.
So as a .NET developer, if you're happy with using HTTP, you can just use a web request, for instance.
Okay.
Right? Or I've written a library which is called Easy HTTP, which what it does, it wraps the web request, making operations of get, put, delete, post easy. And it also has built-in serialization and deserialization. So I can take an object, a .NET object,
yep,
and do a post with that object, and it will automatically deserialize that, serialize that into JSON.
Okay.
And then send it off on the wire.
Alright, so then all I need to do is set references to your library, pass in objects and which method to call method.
Exactly.
And either get, receive, or delete or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
If you're not happy with that,
Mm-hmm.
if you are uncomfortable with working with HTTP and URLs, then you have another option. There's a couple of libraries that have been written around HTTP that encapsulate the HTTP, abstracted away.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just work like, if you're familiar with NHibernate or Entity Framework,
Uh-huh.
how you load a document, how you load an object, how you save it, how you do commit changes, save changes.
Okay.
It has the same APIs. One of them is called Automan, which allows you to pretty much work with it as if you were working with NHibernate.
It just doesn't have that mapping there.
It just doesn't have that
Because it
mapping.
doesn't- yeah. Okay.
Precisely.
Does the database, does it matter what platform the database is running?
Nope. That's one of the cool things about Couch. It runs on so many different platforms.
Okay.
So I use Windows, but it runs on Linux. It actually runs on Android as well. So I have on my Android, I have a Couch server running.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's one of the benefits of it, because it's multi-platform. You can have it on, I think there's even one for iPhone, but you can have it on Android, iPhone, the Symbians, everything.
You were telling me earlier that people use CouchDB in particular for a lot of offline storage.
Yeah, one of the benefits, the biggest benefits of CouchDB is its replication model.
Okay.
So replication, just so if people are not familiar with it, you have a database and you want to make a copy of it. That's to replicate it, right? Now there's two types of replication. The one is called like a master-slave, and then there's master-master. Master-master is that basically you have two concrete exact copies, and you can write to both, read from both, etc. As opposed to sometimes where you have one database which is for reads and then another one for updates. Okay. So with Couch you do a master-master replication. So you take one database and it replicates it exactly to a different one. Okay, and you do that very easily. How? Calling another URL.
Mm-hmm.
You just say my server / replicate and the host and the destination, which are two host and IP addresses. That's it. And instantly it replicates the information for you. And it's smart enough to know that when you make a change in the first one, it will only replicate the changes.
Okay, so we'll replicate the entire database.
No, the first time it will. After that, it won't. And it also gives you the option to do a continuous replication, so monitoring for any change and then pushing it.
Okay.
So since replication is so easy, and since it runs on platforms like Android, I can now have locally running my CouchDB application, and then when I connect, I hit one button and say replicate. and it will just replicate to a server.
Or have a detect. I think most phone operating systems or their APIs, they can tell you when you're connected.
Yeah,
And you can, in that event, when you have these occasionally connected systems,
yeah,
as soon as you become connected, then start to sync up, start to do that replication.
yeah.
But don't stop doing it. Just don't stop taking data just because you're no longer connected to the
Yeah.
internet.
Correct. And one thing that I haven't mentioned, which is very important with Couch, is that so far we've talked about the persistence, right?
Okay.
Couch as a database, but Couch is much more. Couch is actually an application server.
Hmm.
So you don't even need, now as a .NET, because my session here was CouchDB for .NET developers. Why? Because the vast majority of us are used to using things like ASP.NET MVC or Silverlight or whatever as a user interface. But with Couch, you don't even need that. You can actually host applications inside Couch. And the way you do it is using a language like JavaScript or jQuery.
Okay.
So I can write, if you're familiar with ASP.NET MVC, where you have views, right? What are our views? They're just Razor files that read data and display it.
Okay.
Okay? You can do that with jQuery and the templates in jQuery. And you just store that view as another document inside your Couch database.
Okay.
So you don't even need to use ASP.NET MVC as a front end. It's fully built-in application server. It has support for authorization, authentication, cookies, security, validation, everything. So on this little guy over here, I don't even need to write an application for Android. I can just write it in jQuery.
Ah, interesting. So I'm trying to think about how that's going to look. You're going to have, in your database, you're going to have one document that represents the view, and that view will have the data included with it, or
no, the view is just like a template.
It's a template.
Yeah, it's like
so
a template.
So your JavaScript or your jQuery, they are going to be merging together.
They're going to be merging.
That's your controller.
Yeah.
MVC.
Exactly.
Paradigm.
So, if you're doing Android development, you don't need to, if you want to do something on Android, you can just do a simple interface using the actual Couch server itself. And then on your full, version of your desktop, the browser,
you can have more full.
You can have ASP.NET MVC.
Or a fat client, WPF or something like that.
Because a lot of times, with an Android phone, you don't want the full experience. You just want to submit some data, or you want to log some data, and then when you're connected, synchronize it.
Interesting.
So it's.
How is it related to something like MongoDB? Which is also part of this.
It falls all under the same concept of NoSQL, right? And one of the NoSQL people have thought this is about we hate SQL and we hate SQL Server and we hate Oracle. It's not about that. One of the best definitions of NoSQL that I've heard is from Jan Learnhardt, who's one of the developers on Couch, and he did a really nice blog post and he finished it at the end and he said NoSQL is about choice. It's about thinking that there's no longer a requirement that we always use a relational database anymore to persist information. So CouchDB is one of those choices.
Okay.
MongoDB is another one. MongoDB, I'm not too familiar with it. What I do know with Mongo is that it sacrifices certain things for speed. So for example, when you write to it, it doesn't write to disk. It caches it and then it writes it at a later stage. Whereas with CouchDB, you know that when you write, it's going to be there. If the power goes, you're not going to lose anything, right? MongoDB, based on the language you're using to talk to it, it has different libraries that you need to know about. You need to know the API for those libraries. Whereas with Couch, it's just pure HTTP and just URLs. It doesn't get simpler than that. But there are a lot of .NET developers that are using Mongo. And I think one of the reasons is because of the library that's called GNOME or GNOME or something like that, which is kind of like a wrapper that I think has support for Link and that for Mongo. One of the other differences between Mongo and Couch is that Mongo allows dynamic queries. So that means that if I run some query in my code where I can just say like, select from customers where email equals this and name equals that, I don't have to, I can do that with Mongo. With Couch, I can do it as well. However, I need to tell Couch that I'm going to be running this specific query from beforehand.
I need to tell the design timing?
Yeah, at design time, because in Couch, the queries are done with things called views.
I see.
So you need to create the views. So you need to define in your views beforehand what columns of your document you want to get back
Okay.
and what under what filter conditions, what where clauses.
Makes it harder to do ad hoc querying.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, having said that, I'm working with Dale Reagan, who's the author of Automan, and we're coming up with a way to create link for Couch so that you can actually do ad hoc queries
I see.
and get kind of the best of both worlds.
Okay. Well, this has been a pretty good introduction to CouchDB. Is there anything else that is critical that our viewers should know?
No, I think that's it. I mean, it's it's offline support. It runs on multiple platforms. There's no mapping. It's very easy to consume, and it's really reliable. It uses we were talking about earlier, which is multi-version concurrency control.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, every time you write an update to a document, it doesn't go fetch the document and update it. It just writes a complete new version.
I see.
Right, and then when you run a compact, it compacts it
Oh, I
and
see.
deletes all the old versions.
Okay.
So you know that you have that security. One thing that I think that money, whether it's Couch or anything else, that viewers have to be very know about is the concept of eventual consistency, right? Not with Couch, the fact that every time, since I can read a document, when I write a document, it writes a new version. There's nothing that guarantees me that when I've read that version, someone else, 1 millisecond later, is not going to write a new version, right? Because it's not locking the database.
Right.
So you have an eventual consistency, as it's called. You don't know that the data you're reading is really consistent with the last data written, right? Because of a fraction of a second.
Sure.
But we have that problem already in caches. As soon as we
Yeah.
introduce a cache, we have that eventual consistency.
Right, any distributed system, unless you're doing locking and
Yeah,
turning off caching.
exactly. But that's not scalable, right?
And that's not scalable, so people don't do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is CouchDB, is this an open source product?
It's
Is it-
completely
is it-
open source.
Is it free?
It's free. It's written in Erlang. You can, if you want, you can contribute to it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's completely open source and free. You can use it for anything you want. And there are very big companies. You're familiar with the BBC, British Broadcasting
I've heard of it.
Corporation. Yeah, they use CouchDB.
Mhm.
Ubuntu, I think, uses also CouchDB.
Hmm.
So it's been around for a while now.
Okay, and those that are inspired to start working with it, and playing with it, and learning more about it, where would they go?
They can go to couch1.com. Who's the company of the main committers have set up a company that they offer support and hosting. And there, the best resource is that there's a book called The Definitive Guide, CouchDB The Definitive Guide by O'Reilly. They can either purchase that or they can read it online for free. It's a PDF, very complete book. And that's probably the best place to learn about Couch. And then from there they can see links to different blogs that cover more in-depth things about it.
Is that where you go to download as well?
Yes, if you want to download it, you can. They actually have installers for Windows, and you can just download it from there and install it easily.
Okay. How about you? Do you have an online presence?
Pardon?
Do you have a blog?
Yeah, mine is hadihariri.com, which is HADIHARIRI.com.
We'll put a link to that.
And I'm also on Devlicious. I blog there, and my Twitter is hhariri. So they can also email me if they have any questions.
Hadi, thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Very interesting.
Pleasure.
Learning a lot.
Thanks. Technology is great. It's enabled friends to come close together. Let's just hope it doesn't replace true friendship.